Very welcome, everybody. We're so happy to see you all here to learn about this proposed new approach to planning and managing outdoor recreation in protected areas. My name is Sara Estlander. I work at FOS Europe, and our mission at FOS is to boost the impact of nature conservation worldwide. And one of the ways in which we do that is by developing ways for practitioners to be more effective and efficient in their work, protecting this precious planet that we share. And this particular guidance that we'll be looking at today is an example of that kind of work. This guidance has been in the works for quite some time, so we're really excited to finally be able to share it with the world and hear your thoughts and questions and your feedback, what you think about it. We have some excellent speakers lined up for you today. We have Erik Meschaks from the Swedish Environmental Protection Agency first. He will set the scene for us, framing the context for the work and explaining why SEPA wanted to figure out outdoor recreation in protected areas. Then we'll have a few minutes to answer your questions. Then we have Nico Boenisch from FOS Europe, who will talk us through the different parts of the method so that we understand how to apply it. Then we'll have some more time for questions. Then Karolina Johansson from the beautiful island of Gotland will tell us a practical example of using the approach in a real life setting. And at the end, some more discussion time. And we plan to get through all of this in 1.5 hours. Also behind the scenes, we have Linnea Wengdahl from FOS, who is taking care of the technical aspects of the webinar. So thank you, Linnea, for keeping us running here. A few words about how we'll be working today. At the bottom of your Zoom window, you will find a Q&A. That means a question and answer panel, a button. And when you click that, you will find a panel where you can type in questions, and you can upvote questions from others as well. We'll answer as many questions as we have time for, either in writing or during between the presentations. And we will also be asking you questions from time to time in the form of polls that will pop up in your Zoom window. Those are moments for you to reflect on what you've heard and think about what it might mean in your context. We are recording this session and we'll share the recording within a few weeks so that you can rewatch it and you can share it with others who might be interested so that we get a good spread of this method. And Linnea will be sharing the links to more information and contact details in the chat. As we go, you can find all of the information on the FOS website here in this article, introduces the guidance, and you'll find download links here at the bottom, both in English and in Swedish. We've just today released the Swedish version of this guidance. And later we'll also post the webinar recording here. So before we dive in to get a sense of where you all are in your work with outdoor recreation in protected areas, we have a first poll for you. That should be popping up in your Zoom window right now. So the question is, in your context, how is outdoor recreation currently being integrated in protected area planning and management? So maybe you haven't thought about it much. Maybe it's something that you want to do, but you don't really know how. Maybe you're exploring different ways of doing it. Or maybe you already have a systematic method that you've found that works well. Okay, most of you have answered, so let's see what you said. So there's a few of you that have already a systematic method that works well, but most of you are exploring ways to do it or want to do it but don't really know how. So 1.5 hours from now, we hope that those of you that answered the first two options will have some ideas for what to do next. And with that, we are ready to introduce our first speaker. And that is Erik Meschaks, who is joining us from Östersund in Sweden. He works in the management unit of the Swedish Environmental Protection Agency, where he focuses on general guidance and financing for protected areas, as well as management plans for national parks. And currently he's mostly working with habitat management and restoration, in particular the nature restoration law and the EU strategy for biodiversity, and in particular management of forest habitats in protected areas. So over to you, Erik.
Thank you, Sara. Hello, nice to meet everyone, even though it's in a virtual world here, that you're showing interest for this. So I'll frame this, as Sara said, I'm currently mostly working on the habitat management, but when we do that, we, of course, when we do with the area planning, we do also have issues of recreation, of course, because that's what's happening in our areas, that you are the appreciation of the nature and visiting nature. So, but we will give you like a short introduction to this work, as I was part of the starting process here together with the other colleagues. So, because we have used conservation standards for protected areas planning in Sweden for quite a while, and one of the pioneer areas was the Kosterhavet National Park, and I saw that Anita Tullroth is joining us also here. So, and here it was used for the marine planning, the conservation planning, because it's mostly a marine area, but it was not really used for the recreational part of the park, and that's a so you can see really that you had a strength in the methodology, as you probably are quite familiar with addressing the most important issues, creating a framework for adaptive management, and really trying to achieve the best impact you can have. So we have good experiences from the conservation side there, and we also worked in other areas, of course. But as the recreation is a very important part of our work, we thought about can we use the same strength in the methodology to address those issues as well, so it could be more effective. And also there are issues about integrating the different values, because they are meeting in the same area there. So we had some emerging ideas how about to work on this, and from my side of the work, we're working on 2 national parks. One existing one, it's on the left there with the Gotska Sanden National Park, where we were updating the management plan, and then we had a project on potentially a new national park. That's also in my background picture here. It's the Vålådalen area. You can almost see it through the window here as well, in the western part of central Sweden. So, and here we decided that we should use the conservation standards for the habitat management and the species, etc. But we thought about how could we include the recreational management as a part of these projects, because we have for the national parks, we have a sort of branding program, or a common idea on what we want to achieve with them in relation to our visitors. And the part of this program is to provide enriching experiences of interesting nature. And so that is one of our main sort of targets that we should work for. And of course, people are visiting these areas because they are appreciating the views and the different kinds of activities, hiking and swimming in the ocean here on the left there, etc. So, and we are also doing quite a lot of things. We are establishing trails through the beautiful forests. We are providing nature interpretation in forms of signs and brochures and guided tours, etc., etc. And of course, we want to know, are we doing the right things? Are we approaching this on the most effective way so that we are achieving our targets? But we also have a sort of a pressure on the natural values. Here's an example of the hiking and biking on wetland areas. So of course we have an interaction between the conservation values and the recreational activities and also values. So also need to have a more integrated approach was interesting for us. So we sort of made some trial work here to find a better approach to achieve this. And then we reached a point in time where we thought, okay, let's do a more systematic approach to this. And we had a cooperation with the FOS Europe and trying to more thoroughly explore this concept of conservation standards and possibilities to include recreation as a more active part that has been more a passive part as a ecosystem service that is provided by good conservation work, but we wanted to put it more in center together with the natural values. So, but how do you then organize your conceptual model, and how do you formulate your targets, and what is affecting them, and how is the relation and integration with the conservation targets? We made Nico scratch his head quite a few times during this work. That was done together with several of the local authorities in Sweden, together with us. Let's see. Yeah, so it was the start of the starting point with this common exploration together with FOS, and we sort of found a draft method that we decided then to try out in 2 specific settings, and that is what, for example, Karolina will talk about soon. It's in our 2 projects of establishing 2 new national parks, the Bästeträsk area on the left side and the Nämndö National Park area, in potential national park area outside of Stockholm. So we thought, okay, let's use these ideas that we had, and this is our rather specific context, as it's a national parks framing. Recreation can be a much wider concept, and maybe that is this approach not grasped fully, but we thought this was a good pilot areas to test it, and so on. Yeah, so that's sort of the framing of our work, and then I think Nico will go more into depth what was how this was then established in more of a guidance included in the conservation standards community. So yes.
Okay, thank you very much, Erik. That's really helpful for understanding where the need for this method comes from. Well, as we don't have any questions here, I think we can move on. We have another poll for you before we let Nico loose. So we know that while Sweden is unique in many ways, we know that there are similar struggles in other countries as well. So we'd like to get a feeling for what kind of challenges you all have encountered in your work with outdoor recreation in protected areas. So the next poll question here is, what are you struggling with the most when it comes to integrating outdoor recreation in protected area planning and management? You can choose many options in this one. Okay, let's see what the responses look like here. Almost everyone has replied. So there's quite a big spread here. A lot of these issues seem to resonate with people, especially ensuring good opportunities for visitors that don't harm nature values. But a lot of the other options also have a good amount of responses on them. Let's have a look then at how you might address all these things. So Nico Boenisch is going to now present this new approach to planning and managing outdoor recreation in protected areas for us. Nico is co-director for FOS Europe and manages FOS's programmatic work in Europe. And through his work, he aims to build adaptive management capacity in the conservation community. And recently, he's been strongly focused on protected areas and on evidence-based learning, especially about conservation strategies. Take it away, Nico.
Thank you, Sara. Great to see so many people here. And thanks a lot, Erik, for providing a bit of the context of why the Swedish EPA has started this process and the development of this approach. It has been a few years in the making. You heard that we have been practically testing the approach in these 2 sites that are hopefully becoming national parks soon. There were also other occasions where we have tested approaches to training people in this, where we have played with different nature reserves in Sweden, and so on. So these are the most elaborate test runs we have done or applications. Also, as part of the process, the Swedish EPA set up an expert group, and that's one of the things I really would like to do soon, to thank everybody that was involved in that, but I will get to that in a second. First of all, a few words about what FOS is, what kind of organization we are, and also our work with protected areas. I'll do that quickly, but I think it's relevant for everybody to know, to have a bit of context. We're a small international team with people based in Europe, the US, and also Middle and South America. We're around since more than 20 years by now. And what keeps us up at night is basically how can we as a conservation community amplify our collective impact? How can we basically together figure out what works and what doesn't, and improve what we're doing in order to be most effective and have the highest possible impact? With regards to protected areas, we're working with all kinds of different setups globally. So we're working with individual sites, we're working with protected area networks, strictly protected areas, but also more the sustainable use side of things. Sometimes locally managed PAs, sometimes national parks, global north, also global south. So marine and terrestrial, really the entire spectrum. And the main focus of what we do there is support in planning, adapting, and learning about these individual areas, or also sometimes protected area networks or systems, training practitioners in different approaches to improve the management of protected areas. We're currently chairing, some of our colleagues, the Conservation Effectiveness Task Force of the WCPA, where we're trying to basically facilitate the discussion in the community about what is protected area effectiveness in the first place, and how we work collectively towards that. And then as part of all of that, we're developing tools and methods and frameworks that help for practice. What I would like to talk about today in the approach that we're presenting here about integrating outdoor recreation in the protected area management process is short introduction on the approach itself, then the key steps of that approach that have to do with assessing the situation at the site, but then also planning actions and monitoring, building on that, and then a bit about closing the loop. So basically the adaptive management process, building on that. Before I dive in, I'd like to mention, as I said, a few key people here. Daniel Wolf-Watz is, and also Vladimir Miloshev, they are both co-authors of this document. I think Vladimir might be on this call here. Thanks for being here, Vladi, and for all the heavy lifting you've done over the years to write up this guidance, develop the concepts and everything behind it. And also Daniel, who unfortunately cannot be here today, who has been involved heavily since at least the last 3 years in developing this guidance. Other than that, there has been, as I mentioned before, an expert group that supported this work throughout the process. It includes people from the Swedish EPA and also from different counties in Sweden, namely Evelina Estlander, Erik, Hellberg, Meschaks, who just talked, Anita Tudor, who I saw is on the call, Matthias Valens from Gotland, where Karolina, who's going to speak later today, is a good and close colleague. Jenny Hertzman from Blekinge, and Henny Salin from Dalarna. So yeah, many thanks for all the years of joint thinking and providing your expertise in this process. This is basically the group of people that has developed the core elements of how we could integrate outdoor recreation in the adaptive management process for us to then test it in practice and then comment on it again and so on. So it was really an ongoing collaboration between quite a group of people. And last but not least, obviously, thanks to the different teams, especially the two upcoming national park teams who have been testing many different ways of thinking about this together with us. So now with all that, let's dive in, the introduction. Let's define outdoor recreation in the first place. What is it? And in order to do that, I think it helps to start with a definition for recreation. Recreation is a pretty broad concept, actually, which basically means something that we're doing for pleasure, and also for relaxation in our free time, right? So it's a pretty broad thing, and therefore outdoor recreation is actually pretty broad as well. So it's also basically it is recreation that you're doing outdoors, right? So it's staying and being outdoors in different kinds of landscapes for well-being and nature experience without requirements for competition. And that can be a lot of things. It includes also sunbathing or picnicking or even playing on a playground or having a walk in the city. So it's a pretty broad concept. Tourism, because tourism and also nature-based tourism and so on is often mixed into this conversation, is basically something where people are outside their usual environment for either professional or personal purposes. So they're just away from home. If we're putting all of that in a mix and we're trying to understand, so what is outdoor recreation in protected areas then in our minds, it helps to think about this blue dot as kind of the definition for what we're trying to tackle with this guidance here. So there is recreation, very broad concept. Outdoor recreation, also a pretty broad concept. And then there's outdoor recreation in protected areas, which comes with a pretty particular purpose. It has obviously implications on where that is happening exactly. The motivations for people to do it are slightly different, and it includes things like walking in a city. You see that tourism is overlapping with all of these recreation circles here. So some of this outdoor recreation in protected areas could be tourism. Some of it is just local people practicing outdoor recreation in the protected area close by. So this blue dot here is basically what we're working with in the context of this guidance. It's a particular part of the outdoor recreation that is happening. What does that all have to do with the conservation standards? Here's the conservation standard cycle. I think for many on the call, but also in general, there's little surprise about these conservation standards or a cyclic approach to conservation management. The point of these standards is that you're assessing the situation that you're dealing with, you're planning what you're doing in accordance with that. While you're implementing, you're analyzing the data that you're collecting, you're adapting based on what the data tells you. And if you're learning something, you're sharing that internally and also externally so we get collectively smarter. So it's pretty straightforward, and many of you, I think, know that, practice that, and do that in different ways. The key steps of the conservation, of the first two steps of the conservation standards you see here, I think a lot of that is probably familiar to you guys. You need a team, you need to understand what the boundaries of your site are, what the vision is that you would like to achieve, what you're trying to conserve, how that's doing, what's threatening that, what the situation in the area is overall, what's driving that, and then you need to set goals, figure out what you would like to do, how that is going to have an impact, how you're going to measure if that's happening, and also how you're going to operationalize that. So this is all pretty straightforward, standard conservation practice. And what we're doing with this guidance, we're adding on top of that a few steps that relate to these standard steps. that integrate outdoor recreation in the normal ongoing adaptive management process. And I will talk in this talk about all of these steps in a bit more detail. So let's dive in. Assess the situation. So the first step, what are the things we're recommending to do here? We think that there is additional information if you want to integrate outdoor recreation properly in your management planning that you need to collect, which has to do obviously with the outdoor recreation context. And that includes a few key things. It includes the management context. And what we mean with that is you need to understand at the outset, what's the legislative context? What is the financial context? How many resources do you have? How many staff do you have? What's currently already done with regards to outdoor recreation? Is there infrastructure? Are there facilities already? Obviously, it helps to have or develop a map for that, to be able to put that into context on the site. Then secondly, you need to understand a lot of things about your visitors. So what are the motivations for people to come? Who is coming? How many people are coming? What are the needs of the people that are coming? So, which groups of society are coming? Which groups of society perhaps are not coming, if you're keen to provide opportunities for all these groups, or if there are particular issues with some. And then also, what are the concerns of the people that are coming, right? So what are they worried about? What would they like to see? What are they missing? And so on. Building on that, it helps to go in a bit more detail on what people actually do in the area. And we're recommending different analysis here. On the one hand, a spatial, on the other hand, a temporal analysis, and then building on that, an analysis of conflicts. So Karolina might talk a lot more about that than I am, but I'm sometimes picking on the Administrative Gotland example here to visualize a few things. There is no intent that you're able to actually read this. But here you see the map of the potential national park in Estlander and different activities and where they are happening. There are different ways, obviously, of getting that data. Karolina might, I'm not 100% sure, but might talk a bit more about that. But you see that it's interesting probably to understand where are people walking mostly, where are they biking, where are people trying to observe butterflies or see beautiful flowers. Because obviously these activities come with different motivations. They might be also different groups of people, and they also have different requirements of what you need to practice these activities. Plus, obviously, these activities have a varying degree of harmfulness, let's say, on your biodiversity. Another analysis, and this is a simplified table, obviously, but another analysis that really helps is a temporal analysis, where you basically draw up the different activities that are happening and when they are happening in the year in order to understand where is actually the overlap, right? So now, if you do both the spatial and the temporal analysis, you basically can lay the puzzle and you see, hiking and biking happening at the same time, also at the same places, could be that there's potential for conflict. If they're happening completely at different times, the likelihood that these different user groups of an area are going to be in conflict is fairly low in comparison. Building on that, I touched on the conflicts already. You can draw a conflict matrix where you basically put in relation all the different activities that are happening. And you read that table from left to right, and you assess if one activity is in conflict with another one and how severe that conflict is. Once you've done all that analysis, then you have a set of information that's really key. On the one hand, about your visitors, obviously, but then also if you've analyzed these activities, you understand which of these could be in conflict. Some of them might require management if there are severe or substantial conflicts between user groups, that is not good in your area, and you might have to do something no matter if you want or not. And then other than that, you might be aware of some of the activities that are potential threats to your biodiversity in your site, which means you might have to work with them moving forward as well. So that's why that analysis is so key before moving into anything else. Please, if you have any questions, feel free to put them in the Q&A, and we're going to pick them up. Either I can respond after my talk, or others can already type answers for you. Building on that, the next key step is to decide on and design your targets. And there are 3 different types of targets that matter here. 1 or 2 of them are probably very familiar to you. There are conservation targets, so that's the elements of biodiversity that you're trying to conserve. It could be ecological processes, it could be species, it could be ecosystems. That's the kind of normal stuff that you know in your protected area. And these things are providing all kinds of different ecosystem services that lead to human well-being, right? And some of these human well-being you might also target. It could be local livelihoods, it could be health, social cohesion, all kinds of different things, knowledge, you name it. And you probably also are very familiar with the concept of ecosystem services. There are generally 3 types: provisioning services, regulating services, and cultural services. And one special type of cultural service are outdoor recreation services. And an area could provide quite a lot of these, right? So if there's forest and also freshwater, and also mountains and also grassland and so on and so forth, obviously you can imagine how many different services might be available at one particular site. What we are recommending here now is that a management team actually sits down and picks from these available services the ones that that team wants to focus on. So and basically formulates targets out of them, outdoor recreation targets, that become the anchor point for what you're really trying to maintain and develop in terms of opportunities for people. So here are the definitions of these 3 different types of targets. One more time, I think conservation targets are pretty straightforward for everybody, also human well-being targets. Outdoor recreation targets are really, things that are of interest for the visitors, and also that the management team chooses to focus on, and generally they depend on 1 or more of your conservation targets. So you can basically only develop these if the conservation targets that provide them are in healthy condition. So if we look at an example, this is an example from a, let's say, fictive protected area in northern Sweden, where you would have coniferous lime forests, you would have wetlands, rare orchids, and also geological formations that make up your conservation targets. And these provide all kinds of different ecosystem services, but also the team has chosen 3 outdoor recreation opportunities as outdoor recreation targets: the opportunity to experience the forest, the opportunity to experience the mountain scenery, and also the opportunity to learn about geology. And all these ecosystem services together with your outdoor recreation targets provide different human well-being. In order to land on what these outdoor recreation targets you want to choose are, in order to land on that, to decide on that, it helps to answer some of these questions that are listed here on the left-hand side. So we're really looking for the key outdoor recreation services for you to target. So some of these questions, or all of these questions, are the services unique or at least characteristic for the area? Also, are the services harming conservation targets in any way? So if we would make use of these services or even promote them, what is the implication for the conservation targets that service depends on? Is there a visitor demand, at least a potential one, perhaps even an existing one? So do you know from your analysis of the visitors that there's motivation to go to that area in order, to make use of these opportunities? Do they contribute? Do they help to contribute to the human well-being that you have decided your protected area should contribute to? So, for example, if local livelihoods would be something that you're aiming for, then, is there opportunity to develop something that's actually beneficial also for locals? And lastly, do they potentially help reduce threats or conflicts in the area? So if I establish an opportunity for a particular user group in such a way that it's actually perhaps balancing out on an existing conflict or guiding people to a part of the protected area that is currently heavily used, away from that to another place, or vice versa, it helps to channel people only to one place in order to decrease pressure elsewhere, and so on, right? So can this opportunity, if I design it well, actually help to solve some of my problems? So ideally, all of these questions apply for you to choose one of these ovals as an outdoor recreation target. Another thing to keep in mind is that people are obviously different. I touched on it a few times. There are concepts out there like the 7 lifestyles approach, where people are put in different brackets like adventure seeker, pleasure seeker, insight seeker, and so on. Something comparable that we are recommending here is looking at the outdoor recreation traditions of people. So these are slightly edited from a paper from Jensen and others, the Swedish outdoor recreation traditions. And you see here that there are different practices and also different arenas and different motivations of why people are practicing outdoor recreation. And they come, they can be categorized in different traditions: a romantic tradition, a physical tradition, a tradition that's more focused on history or traditions, one that is motivated by resource use or by natural science or social interaction. So there are all kinds of reasons of why people are going out there and what they are looking for. And it helps if your targets are, let's say, your set of targets provide a spectrum of opportunities that is actually accommodating for many of these different motivations or traditions of people. Because ideally, at least in the Swedish context, the role of the protected area system is also to provide good opportunities to the whole of society. And if you take that serious, then obviously you want to cover for many of these different traditions in what you're providing with the opportunities you're designing. Lastly, about these targets, and again, perhaps Karolina will say more about it. This is another example from Besteträsk. I don't go into the details, but it really helps to formulate exactly what you think your target really is, to formulate a key description, and also the requirements for the target that you're looking for in your protected area. Because if you do that, it comes with, you're able to put it on a map, right? So if you have a good description of what your target really means and what you're looking for in order to establish it, you will know in these parts of the area, it's possible to develop that target. In these parts, it's probably not possible. And if you do that well in your design phase, that has huge implications on economizing on the infrastructure that you're developing for good opportunities or targets in the area. Once you have all these targets set, the next step is to try and find out what are the threats in your area. And I'm pretty sure that many of you are familiar with threats to conservation targets. In the outdoor recreation context, I mentioned it earlier when I talked about the activity analysis. What are people doing in the area? It is key to now collect all these different things where people are doing harmful things for outdoor recreation and assess them as part of your threat rating. So for simplification reasons, you see here in the example, only outdoor recreation activities as threats. There could be all kinds of other things, right? It's just as an example. Then in addition, there could be threats directly to your outdoor recreation targets. Like in this case, the conflict between bikers and hikers. The main thing that does is it's harming the opportunity for people to experience the forest in the way that they would like to. So it's threatening the opportunity you're trying to establish. It's not that harmful for biodiversity per se, right? So it goes directly into your outdoor recreation target. And there could be other conflicts. You see that here at the bottom, where, particular user groups might really be in conflict. You need to find a solution for that. That's actually not even related directly to one of your targets, but it is something that you need to deal with, and we're recommending to make it visible in your model that you're building in order to be able to manage it with strategies as well. You also see the ratings. There are ratings for the threats on conservation targets. There are also ratings for threats on recreation targets. And we're really adamant on that. We're recommending to keep these two apart, because if you would make one summary threat rating, that would be really polluted, especially if, as these threats are harming your conservation targets, which also harm your outdoor recreation opportunities, obviously. So that's really key. If you're interested in the details of this, there's a lot more detail about how to do these ratings in the guidance. So please go there and have a look if you want to know more. And then you're complementing your situation model. You're making sure that you understand what's actually driving these threats, i.e., where are my entry points for strategies in order to solve that. And that is the last part of assessing the situation. Building on that entire understanding you've now created, the outdoor recreation context, and also how that interacts basically with the biodiversity at your site and with human well-being and what you're really targeting for outdoor recreation, you can move on and plan actions and monitoring. And the way that works is that you start with goals and you want to understand 3 different things. What are the environmental conditions that I need? What are the social conditions that I need? And also, what are the managerial conditions that I need in order for that outdoor recreation target to be in good shape? So it's on the one hand, obviously, the status of the conservation target that outdoor recreation target depends on. It's the social conditions. So how many people do I want for that opportunity that I'm providing here, or how few? And also, what kind of infrastructure, facilities, information, interpretation do I need in order to bring that target to life? So in the example here of the opportunity to experience the lime forest, you would define what are the things you're really looking for in terms of these conditions. And building on that, you can formulate a measurable goal related to that. Like, for example, by 2024, there's a one-way trail that is easy to reach, easy to follow, free of bikers through the untouched coniferous lime forest for undisturbed, educational, satisfying, and safe hiking during the bare ground season. And then you can also define, how many people you would like to make use of that opportunity through the course of that year. Once you have that, you can design strategies. And I don't go deep into the details in the interest of time as well. but I want to highlight that there are different types of strategies. And what that integrated thinking helps you do now is, on the one hand, there is zoning probably in many of the areas that you guys are working with. In that zoning is anchored a certain level of accessibility, and that has to do with the kinds of things that are either automatically or not automatically regulated or can be regulated. So that's something to always keep in mind, obviously. And building on that, there are site management and also visitor management strategies where you can develop infrastructure and facilities as part of site management, or provide information, or if needed, also regulate things or provide guidance as part of the visitor management. And you see how different strategies are achieving different things together here, because they are working together. So we're providing a hiking path, we're raising awareness about the problem of the bare ground driving, we're improving the guidance so people can actually find the path. And in addition, we're enhancing the opportunity by providing interpretation. We can use a theory of change to then understand how is that all going to work, and formulate basically how we're going to have the desired impact. And if we do that, we can understand a bit better basically what to monitor later on. There's one step in between that we would like to highlight, which is the physical arrangements. We do recommend, because there are so many things you need to do in terms of toilets, garbage bins and parking lots and entrances and other things you need to do at your protected area. Sometimes it helps to make a separate analysis of the infrastructure that's there and that you need to build as part of your strategies, and either make separate theories of change or use a table-based analysis to express what are we building these physical arrangements for and how do they relate to our outdoor recreation targets, because that will be really key when you're developing and or maintaining the infrastructure. And that's one of the key things, obviously, you have to prioritize on as part of your budget decisions. Building on that, you have your objectives and goals set along your theory of change, and you will use that for monitoring. I'm not going into the details of all of this. I just want to show you what the conceptual implications are if you do monitoring along your integrated strategy here. You could have a monitoring table. There are lots of fantastic tools out there for different methods of monitoring visitors and outdoor recreation in general. Also here, the guidance is referring to some resources, but there are many more out there. So that's not the point of this. The point is more, how does that help you to actually close the loop and practice adaptive management, basically going back to the cycle, where if you would process all your monitoring data on your theory of change and on your integrated view of both outdoor recreation and conservation, you could see things where you might need to adjust your strategy and actually improve what you're doing. To pick one example here, that's obviously a mock-up, but let's assume you have been raising awareness for the problem of the bare ground driving, and still there are many snowmobiles that actually destroy the forest. You have still the same problem as before, although you're solving some other problems and there's still a good opportunity to experience the forest at this point. But perhaps if more of that is going on and you continue to have these problems, that opportunity will be gone eventually as well. So you might need to do something about that. And perhaps it has to do with, if you tried the awareness raising already to the extent possible, that here's an occasion where you actually need to regulate the use. But I touched on it a few times. The point of what we're trying to suggest here is that we're not regulating straight away. We're regulating when we need to, because it's unavoidable, because that use will actually destroy either your conservation target and or your related outdoor recreation opportunity as well. If you can find other solutions by looking at it from an integrated perspective, that would be the better and more constructive version where you can maintain opportunities for people and enhance both outdoor recreation and conservation in many occasions. So I'd like to close with that. Thank you very much for your attention. And I think we have something like 5 or 6 minutes for questions, if I'm not wrong. Thanks a lot.
Yeah, that's right, Nico. Thank you. Thank you very much. So that was a half-hour overview of an 80 paid guidance. So clearly there's a lot more detail to be explored. You can find all of those details in the guidance, as well as in the conservation standards and related materials. And for those of you that are wondering if the slides will be available afterwards, everything that you see in Nico's slides is in that guidance. So all the diagrams, all the tables you will find there. So we encourage you to have a look there. If there's anything else that you need, feel free to reach out to us afterwards. I see that there are some questions coming in now. Before we get to those, I want to get some reactions from the audience here with another poll. So having seen these different tools in this method, which to you are the most interesting ones for implementing in your context? Again, you can choose more than one. All right, let's see what that poll result was. Pretty even across the board again. Physical arrangements were least interesting, but the context analysis seems quite interesting. Targets, goals, strategies, theories of change, and monitoring. Nico, I don't know if you have any reaction to these results. Is this more or less what you expected? That what will be most interesting to our audience?
I guess the only thing where I'm surprised is that my assumption was that that basically the physical arrangements would actually rate higher. Other than that, I'm not that surprised that it's equally relevant, because it's kind of all pretty relevant. The physical arrangements, I mean, the reason why we touch on that in the guidance is that obviously often a big part of the budget that a protected area has available goes into either building or maintaining existing infrastructure. And one of the things that I think Erik also touched on in his introduction, one of the issues is obviously sometimes management teams are a bit unsure if it actually makes sense to maintain this infrastructure and for what reason you're doing it. And the aim that we have here is that, and perhaps Karolina might touch on that. I'm always not sure what exactly you're touching on, Karolina, but one of the purposes here is obviously, if you have your outdoor recreation targets well designed, you know what you're aiming for outdoor recreation wise. That comes with implications on infrastructure and facilities, and you can actually, plan for that in a different and more strategic way. That doesn't mean all the necessary infrastructure that you need to have, like parking lots, etc., goes away and is not relevant anymore. But at least it falls into place, and you have a more informed basis to decide what infrastructure you're aiming for and what not, and what you need. So that's interesting that rate's lower. Other than that, I can connect to that, to the answers here. Yeah.
Thank you, Nico. Speaking up for the value of practical arrangement as well. So let's not forget about those. We have a bunch of questions answered in text here in the QA box. So and we still have 10 minutes at the end of the whole webinar to answer more of them. So keep them coming in. But before we get there, our final speaker today will make all of this real for us. So Karolina Johansson is a biologist from the island of Gotland in Sweden, and she's currently working as a project leader at the county administrative board to establish a new national park. And when she wants to practice outdoor recreation, she prefers the forest for doing that. Go ahead, Karolina.
Well, thank you for that introduction, Sara, and hello, everyone. Let's see if I can share my presentation with you. Yes, so I'm gonna talk a bit about our work, what we've been doing so far with planning for outdoor recreation when establishing a new national park in Sweden. And I work at the Protected Nature Unit at the County Administrative Board on Gotland as a project leader, as Sara said. And so let's take you to Lake Bästeträsk in northern Gotland. And you can see all those 30 golden stars on the map in Sweden. And you can see where Gotland is. So let's give you a short introduction to the area. And Lake Bästeträsk, it's the biggest lake on Gotland. But it's not only the lake that's going to be included in the national park. We also have the surrounding beaches and other small lakes, a lot of different wetlands, Nordic alvar, limestone pavements. We have forests, mainly pine forest, and we have the shallow marine environments. And all these different nature types are forming a mosaic landscape. And the landscape is flat, and we have several roads going through the area. So it's easy to access, and we think that it's also attractive for outdoor recreation. So if we start with the conservation targets before we go into outdoor recreation, we have these conservation targets for the national park. It's the coastal and marine ecosystems. We have the forests, the wetlands, lakes and streams, grassland, and the limestone pavements. So the project to establish a national park, it's a really long project. We started the planning of the project in 2019, and we're aiming for the inauguration in 2026. And right now, we've been doing a lot of planning and planning for outdoor recreation, and we're right in the beginning of starting to build on entrances, trails, and other outdoor facilities. So when it comes to planning the outdoor recreation, Nico went through the different steps, and we did several of these steps. We've been identifying and analyzing outdoor activities in the area. We've been selecting targets for outdoor recreation. And we also did a lot of mapping. Where are these activities taking place, and where where are our targets? And we did this in our project team, and I think we have quite a good knowledge about the area in the project team, but we also used different stakeholders groups to get more answers about activities, and also we kind of tested the outdoor recreation targets on people living in the area or using the area. Yes. So this is an example of how we're analyzing the activities. It's kind of familiar what Nico showed you. We have the different activities and trying to see if there are any conflicts between different activities. And as you can see on this picture, it's very green, so we didn't see many conflicts. But then we have to have in mind that this is not an existing national park, and it's not an area with a lot of visitors. So what we had to do is also kind of look into the future and think what will happen when the national park is established and we have all the visitors coming to the park. And I think that's really important to do, but also it's very hard to do that, to try and guess what changes we will see in the future. Yes, a short view of the activities. So our outdoor recreation targets, we decided on these 7 outdoor recreation targets. It's the sea, the mosaic landscape, time perspective in nature, nature tranquility, people and the landscape, the limestone pavements, and following the water. And we started to do these maps for all the targets. And in this example, we have the target that we call the sea, and the sea is about experience the sea both on the water and below the surface, and we'll try to map out where are the best places to have this experience. Of course, close to the sea. So maybe this was the easiest one to map. Another example, the mosaic landscape, where we have a lot of different habitats within a limited area. And I think that's one of the hardest one to map, because that's almost the whole entire area. But we tried to find where the best spots are, the best examples of the mosaic landscape. And this is an example of the target people and the landscape. And this is about experience the traces of human activities over thousands of years that's been ongoing in this area. And it's a lot connected to people and understanding how the land use have contributed to the biodiversity in the area. So we've got a lot of maps, and when we put all this information together in one map, we have a pretty good view of the area and a lot of knowledge of the area. And we decided in the team that it should be possible to access and take part of all these outdoor recreation targets. And we used all the mapping as a help when we try to place and prioritizing the different entrances and hiking trails and other physical infrastructure, and deciding on how many entrances, where to put the trails and other infrastructure. So this is an example if we take one of these entrances and how we use the targets. So you can see the entrance is marked with an E. And we have different hiking trails, the red and green and yellow lines on this map, and a bit of what you can experience close to the entrance and what you can reach with the hiking trails. And from this entrance in this part of the national park, we can have the mosaic landscape, people and the landscape, limestone pavements, and following the water as our main targets for this area. Yes, and of course, when establishing a new national park, we also need to think about what regulations do we need in the park, and having these outdoor recreation targets and mapping them and having all the activities, it's also really helpful when assessing the need for regulations, and also what we don't need to regulate, also very important. And we also create themes for nature interpretation, and we use the outdoor recreation targets, and we use nature interpretation as a strategy to make the experience better. But of course, we also have all these practical aspects. Even if we use the conservation standards, looking into targets and so on, we still have all practical aspects. We have existing facilities in the area, some places with a lot of visitors. Where are the existing roads? Where are bus stops? We have a nature that's delicate, and it's important not to harm the nature. Of course, we have a limited budget. We can't do anything. We have residents who are worried, and also we have a lot of expectations from visitors and future visitors. And all of this we have to also address in the planning, of course. But I think by using this way of planning for outdoor recreation, I think we have a better focus on what we want to achieve with the national park. If we use this from the beginning, I think it's quite easy to dive into these practical aspects and start planning from them instead of what we want to achieve. And of course, this is a new area, a new destination, a new national park. We are expecting more visitors to the area, and there are a lot of things that we don't know today. So I think in the coming years, we have to follow how it turns out really close and be prepared for making changes along the way. And yeah, that was my final slide. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Karolina, for bringing all of this onto a really practical level for us. It's really inspiring to see a real life example. We have some questions coming in the box, and we also have in the QA box, I meant to say, and we also have about 15 minutes left here, so we'll give it a while for you to formulate your questions. Just as a reminder, if you want to have a look at this guidance, it's available to download on our website, and Linnea will post the link here in the chat. And a lot of the guidance also relies on the conservation standards, the documentation around the conservation standards. So if there's anything that is not super clear from the guidance, you will find more detail about that in the conservation standards and in all of the how-to materials that are that exist around that guidance. Let's see what our questions are looking like. Nico is replying here to Sergi. There was one question that I saw in a couple of places. Somebody had asked why swimming conflicts with swimming, which is an interesting one. All right, Karolina, perhaps you want to say a couple of words about that?
Yeah, that could be kind of hard to understand if you don't know the area, of course. We have a really popular site where we have about 70,000 visitors every summer. It's an old quarry that are filled with water, so people go there for swimming and sunbathing in the summer. So if we have more visitors, I mean, it's already a conflict with people thinking it's too crowded. So that's why it was red in the rating.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and sometimes it can be an asymmetric relationship, right? That between two activities, that one activity affects another one, but the other one does not affect that first one as in the same degree. Okay, I don't see any open questions at this moment. I wonder if Nico, Erik, do you have anything to add here? Anything that came up during Karolina's presentation? Something that you'd like to comment on or clarify?
Not really. I think it was super clear, everything. So it's interesting to see how it works in practice, because it was rather some theoretical approach or conceptual approach that we used, and there was really a need to see if it works in reality and what's the strength and weaknesses and so on. And as I said, we headed out for these two areas as pilot areas, and we will evaluate the experiences and develop our work from there. So it was really interesting to hear Karolina that made an excellent presentation.
Yeah, I mean, I think Karolina said everything. What I would like to highlight from a methodological point of view is, I think that the team on Gotland really thought deeply about, on the one hand, what are these targets? How do we define them in such a way that we understand what they are? And they have made a very elaborate process. I touched on it in my presentation as well, on then taking these targets, putting them on the map of the area, and also integrating that in the planning and design of the infrastructure and facilities that are required. So that was, you know, being part of the group of people that had developed the approach and thought about a lot about the, you know, let's say the practical complexity of then making it work. It was really fantastic to observe how also the team took a lot of ownership of that and integrated it in all kinds of ongoing other processes that are obviously not only involving the same partners that are trying to test an approach. So that was really exciting and a pleasure to work with Karolina. Really, really fun.
We have an anonymous question here about who were invited to make the process. I wonder if that refers to the approach in general or to the work done in Bästa Desk. Probably the Bästa Desk work. I would guess. Karolina, do you want to talk about a bit about the team that you had?
Yes, so the project team are members from the County Administrative Board, the Swedish Environmental Protection Agency, and the municipality mainly. And I think we had some extra guests from time to time in the workshops too. Yeah.
So like a smaller core team, but then filling out with experts and other interested people who are needed.
Yeah, and then we took the result and kind of tried it in different stakeholders groups as well. Yeah.
Great. I think that is bringing us to the end of this webinar. This chat is open. We encourage you to share what's on the top of your head right now after the past 1.5 hours. Tell us what you're taking away from all of this. Thank you to the audience for your attention, for your excellent questions. Keep in mind, if you want to apply this in your context, we'd be really happy to hear how it works, if there's anything in the approach that we should improve. And we're also happy to help you implement it, walk you through the process together. So please reach out and let's talk about that if you're thinking about it. Thank you to our 3 fantastic speakers for sharing your insights. Thank you to everyone who's been involved in creating and testing this approach, from SEPA and the county administrative boards in Sweden. Thank you to Linnea for making us look good, taking care of all the technical aspects in the webinar. We'll be sharing this recording with you in the next couple of weeks. Everyone who's signed up to the webinar will get an email, and we'll also add it there to our web article at fosonline.org/outdoor-recreation. Linnea is sharing that information now in the chat. Thank you all very much, and we'll see you next time.